Beastlord, NieR Replicant. Long, long ago, in a faraway kingdom, there were 3 brothers. The eldest brother was a king who ruled over the nation entire. He was the most terrifying king, feared by all. Each day, the king would select one of his subjects to execute as a sacrifice. This day, he chopped off a mother's head and forced her family to watch. The head spun 3 times as it flew through the air before landing next to the head of her son, who the king had previously killed. Oh, the horror of it all! But the king merely watched the sight unfold before him and laughed in the most unsettling voice. One day, the king contracted an illness most dire, one which caused his body to rot while he was still alive. But though diseased, the king would still drag his decaying flesh to the executions all the same. His retainers dared not defy their king, so they continued to kill day after day after day after day. In the end, the king rotted and died. His was disgusting, foul, rotten death. But his retainers continued carrying out executions before the king's rotted corpse every day, killing. Every day, the rotted king and rotted retainers and the rotted citizens and the rotted you. Beastbain, NieR Replicant. Long, long ago, in a faraway kingdom, there lived 3 brothers. The middle brother was a famous general who commanded a vast army. People everywhere were terrified of his troops, for they were most violent indeed. This general loved to make war. He enjoyed nothing more than watching cities burn and corpses pile up, and he fought not to subjugate, but simply to destroy all that he could. His well-trained soldiers laid waste to towns, cities, and even nations for the sake of their general. And as they hewed and hacked and chopped, the general would chuckle to himself in the most vulgar of tones. The army marched on and on, nations by the sea, nations in the mountains, nations in the desert, nations in the tundra, nations to the east, nations to the west. The general cared not. He simply wished to watch it all burn. His orders were absolute, and for years beyond counting, the soldiers killed and 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 killed. After some time, the army arrived in a certain nation. They killed its soldiers. They killed its townspeople. They killed its princesses and princes and dukes and bakers and lawyers and accountants and beggars and thieves. Eventually, a shabby general came pleading for his life with tears in his eyes, but they killed him as well. However, the soldiers thought he seemed familiar and tried to recall how they might have known him. In that moment, however, the general's daughter appeared, and they became so engrossed in ending her life, they never thought about the matter again. Beastcurse, NieR Replicant. Long, long ago, in a faraway kingdom, there lived 3 brothers. The youngest was a terrifically lazy lad who spent most of his days fast asleep. However, he was every bit as cheerful as he was lethargic, and so was beloved by all. When the nation was beset upon by a most contagious disease, the youngest son did not but laze about the palace, humming to himself all the while. But his cheerful music comforted the townspeople, so instead of hating him, they sang his praises. "Oh, what a fine young man," they would say. "Just the finest young man you will ever find." When the nation became embroiled in war, the youngest son did not but laze about the palace. telling stories of the good old days all the while. But his fascinating stories helped the townspeople forget the horrors of war, so instead of hating him, they sang his praises. "Oh, what an amazing young man," they would say. "Just the most amazing young man you will ever find." One day, the youngest son was lazing about the palace as usual when he realized he could no longer hear the voices of the townspeople. He wondered why that might be. He lazied and he wondered. He lazied and he wondered. He lazied and he wondered. Eventually, all the wondering tired him out, and he went to sleep. That is why, in that nation where all have perished from war and disease, the only sound that can still be heard is the soft snoring of a young man. It is a nation of happiness, a nation of happiness, a nation of happiness, a nation of happiness, a nation of happiness. Beastlord, NieR Automata. Once upon a time, there were 3 princesses. The eldest princess was thought by all to be the most brilliant woman in the kingdom, and she soon sat upon the throne of her homeland as their queen. The new queen raised a mighty army. To afford the endeavor, she taxed her people, and in turn, they were given jobs in new factories created to support the war effort. People worked, money flowed. As the army grew strong, the demand for factories grew with it, and then the cycle repeated. More work, more money, more work, more money. The queen's plan proceeded just as she had envisioned it. To further strengthen the kingdom, we were converted to machines to enhance our output in factories and the military. Our queen in turn became the control system that rules us to this day. Beastbain, NieR Automata. Once upon a time, there were 3 princesses. The middle princess wasn't very bright, but was renowned by all as a great beauty. Once she came of age, she was married off to the king of a neighboring nation. The neighboring king adored his new wife and treasured her looks above all else. He gave the middle princess 6 new dresses and 8 fresh flowers every day, and his love caused her beauty to shine all the more. The middle princess did all she could to remain beautiful for her king, but she knew time would eventually catch up with her, as it did for all. So after much hard thought, she developed a cunning plan. The middle princess had herself stuffed and mounted so she could remain beautiful for all time. The king wept tears of joy at the sight, but alas, 2 years later, war broke out, and her body was crushed under the rubble of the castle. Beastcurse, NieR Automata. Once upon a time, there were 3 princesses. The youngest princess was widely regarded as the ugliest woman in all the land, but her heart was gentle, honest, and pure. Hoping to aid others in need, the youngest princess would travel to the fields to offer succor to the peasants, but they would reject her kindness with cruel words. The youngest princess knew her looks were driving people away, yet she kept donating her life to the service of others. Figuring that the fault lied in her own lack of devotion, day after day this continued, for years without end. The youngest princess died alone, curled in the back of a damp, wet alley. She was so ugly that no one had the courage to give her a proper burial. Instead, she rotted where she lay, turning ever uglier until she faded into the earth. Beastlord, NieR Reincarnation. Once, in a kingdom far away, there were 3 laws imposed on the people by the royal family. Violating a law would result in harsh punishments, or even death. But most citizens still praised them. The first law was do not steal. This obviously included theft and burglary, but also life. And once there was even a dispute as to whether stealing one's heart counted. The second law was do not harm another's reputation. Though it seemed a kindly law, it was actually enacted to avoid damaging the dignity of the kingdom through language or insult. The third law was a secret, which the people loved, for they felt it made everyone more considerate. Alas, no one realized it was done simply so the royal family can execute whomever they wished. Beastbain, NieR Reincarnation. Once upon a time, a very young king ruled over his kingdom. His clever ministers took care of the day-to-day affairs, so all the king had to do was sit on the throne and smile. Still, he had 3 wishes he wanted to come true. The first of his wishes was to grow up quickly. He'd always felt powerless because of his youth and wanted to become an adult, so both his own people and other countries might acknowledge him as a leader of worth. His second wish was to create a country where his people always felt safe. His beloved father, the late king, had shared this dream, and he was determined to make it happen. His last wish was to kill all of his ministers, who had murdered his father for their own gain. He smiled as he thought about this, and about how he would make the wish come true the moment he was grown. Beastcurse, NieR Reincarnation. Once there were 3 lords called the Knight of Power, the Knight of Wisdom, and the Knight of Heart. They each ruled a third of the kingdom, but one, the Knight of Heart, was rather ordinary. Due to his affability and trustworthiness, the Heart's subjects relied on him, but he was troubled by 2 things in particular: why he was chosen to lead, and the meaning of heart. The Knight of Power was valiant, the Knight of Wisdom was wise, so why did the king name him the Knight of Heart? No matter how hard he thought, he never came to a satisfying answer. He thought about the meaning of heart as he basked in the king's lust upon the bed. Though he never noticed his true intentions, the knight still gave the king his entire being.